You're not a millennial, definitely not Gen Z, but here's what nobody tells you about why your brain works differently. What would happen if you took a human brain, right in the middle of building itself, and completely changed the world around it? Not slowly, practically overnight. New rules, new social systems, new ways of connecting with other people, everything different. That's not a thought experiment. It already happened to anyone born between roughly 1993 and 1998. Psychologists call them Zillennials. And what happened to their brain during those years created something that has never existed before in human history. If you were born in that window, this is going to explain things you've felt but never had words for. And if you're raising, managing, or living with someone who was, this might change how you understand them. Your brain doesn't finish building itself until around age 25. The last part to develop controls who you are, how you make decisions, how you read people, how you handle stress. It's your personality's construction site. A long-term study published in Nature Neuroscience confirmed this part of the brain keeps rewiring itself well into your 20s. It's wide open during your teenage years, taking in everything around it, using the world as a blueprint. For every generation before Zillennials, that blueprint stayed mostly consistent. The world you were born into was roughly the same world you graduated into. Things changed, but slowly. Your brain had time to build around one set of rules. Zillennials didn't get that. They started building in a world where if you wanted to hang out with someone, you called their house, a real phone, attached to a wall. And whoever picked up, you had to talk to them first. Could be their dad, could be their older brother who didn't like you. Didn't matter. You had that conversation. You made plans to meet at 3 p.m., and you just showed up. No confirmation text, no share my location. If your friend wasn't there, you waited. You'd never know why unless you saw them at school on Monday. You took photos on disposable cameras. 24 shots. That was it. You wouldn't see them for a week. Half came back blurry. Somebody's thumb in the corner. Those were your photos. If you're over 40, you're nodding right now. If you're under 30, this sounds like a history documentary. That gap, that's the point. Because right around 2006, 2007, while these kids were 12, 13, 14 years old, everything flipped. Facebook opened to everyone. Texting replaced calling. Within 3 years, smartphones existed. Instagram launched. Snapchat appeared. The entire social world rebuilt itself from scratch. And their brain, still under construction, still laying down the wiring for how to be a person, absorbed all of it. The old world and the new world, at the same time. Most people's brains run one operating system. Zillennials are running two. One half was built analog. The other half was built digital. And those two systems don't always agree with each other. That conflict, that's where everything starts. So what does running two systems look like in daily life? It looks like exhaustion, but not the kind most people understand. If you're a Zillennial, right now you've probably got texts, Instagram DMs, email, Slack from work, maybe WhatsApp, maybe Discord, and at least 2 group chats going at once. That's not unusual. That's Tuesday. But here's what most people miss. Every single one of those platforms requires a different version of you. You don't text your boss the way you text your best friend. You don't reply to your mom on Facebook the way you respond on Reddit. Your LinkedIn voice sounds nothing like your group chat voice. Your brain is running a constant calculation. Which platform? Which version of me? What tone? Can I use this emoji with this person? Should I reply now or wait? You're making these micro decisions 50 or 60 times a day without even noticing. It runs in the background like an app you never closed. A 2023 study from the American Psychological Association found that managing multiple digital identities uses significantly more cognitive energy than single-context socializing. It's not a small difference. The mental load is real and it's measurable. So if you're a parent wondering why your 28-year-old seems drained after doing nothing all day, this is why. They weren't doing nothing. Their brain was managing 5 different social identities across platforms that each have their own unwritten rules. That's not laziness. That's a workload you can't see. But here's what that workload built. Zillennials can sit across from someone, put the phone down, and hold a real conversation. Full eye contact, fully present, because they remember what that felt like before screens took over. And then an hour later, they can pick up a brand new app they've never seen and figure it out in 10 minutes. Most people can do one or the other, be present in person or be fluent online. Zillennials can do both. That's what running two operating systems actually looks like when it works. But every skill has a cost, and the cost of this one shows up in a place nobody expected. In 2008, the economy fell apart. You probably remember where you were. If you're in your 40s or 50s, you might have lived it directly. Lost a job, watched savings disappear, maybe almost lost your house. It was brutal. And you understood what was happening because you were an adult. Now imagine you were 13. You don't fully understand what a mortgage is. You don't know what the market crashed means. But you see your dad sitting at the kitchen table at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday when he's supposed to be at work. You hear conversations that stop when you walk into the room. You notice your mom checking prices at the grocery store in a way she never used to. Maybe someone says, "We're fine," in a voice that means they're not fine. You absorb all of that, not as facts, as feelings. Your brain, still building its understanding of how the world works, writes a rule. Everything can fall apart. Even if you do everything right, the floor can just disappear. That lesson went deep, deeper than most Zillennials realize. Research from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that people who experience economic downturns during adolescence carry altered risk perception for decades afterward. It's not a mindset, it's a neurological imprint. But here's where it gets complicated. At the exact same time, a completely different message showed up. Social media exploded, and with it came hustle culture. Every platform was full of 22-year-olds calling themselves entrepreneurs, dropshipping, crypto, personal brands. The message was loud and constant. The system failed your parents, so build your own thing. Work harder, sleep less, grind now, rest later. Fear and ambition, hitting the same brain. During the same years, while it was still deciding how to think about the future. And now they're stuck in a place that's hard to describe unless you're in it. They want stability because they've seen what happens without it. But they don't fully trust that stability is real. They'll leave a job that's making them miserable. But unlike someone younger, they usually won't quit without something else lined up. They want meaningful work, but rent is due on the 1st. If you manage Zillennials at work, this might be the most useful thing you hear today. That employee who seems restless isn't ungrateful. They're running a constant calculation. Is this safe enough to stay, but meaningful enough to be worth it? They need both. And if you only offer one, they'll eventually leave. Not because they're disloyal, because their brain was trained to never stop scanning for the floor to drop out. That constant scanning made them some of the most adaptable workers alive. They don't freeze when things change. They expect change. They've been expecting it since they were 13, sitting at that kitchen table, watching their parents pretend everything was okay. But that adaptability created a side effect, one that shows up every single day. Quick example. A Zillennial needs to buy a new mattress. Simple, right? Pick one, buy it, sleep on it. Here's what actually happens. They Google Best Mattress 2026. 14 listicles that all disagree. They check Reddit. Someone says memory foam changed their life. Next comment says it destroyed their back. They watch a YouTube review, then realize that reviewer was sponsored. They find an unbiased review. Wonder if that one's secretly sponsored too. They read about off-gassing chemicals. Now they're worried about that. 3 weeks later, still sleeping on the old mattress. If you're over 40, you probably walked into a store, laid on 3 options, picked the one that felt good, and went home. Done. That difference isn't about mattresses. It's about what happened to their relationship with information. When Zillennials were kids, information was scarce. You wanted to know something, you went to a library or asked someone. Or you just didn't know, and not knowing was normal. You'd argue with your friend about what year a movie came out and nobody could prove it, so you just lived with it. Then Google happened. Wikipedia happened. Information went from something you worked for to something that never stops coming. And that shift happened while their brain was still learning how to decide what matters. But they also watched misinformation become a real problem. Relatives sharing made-up stories on Facebook that looked real. Conspiracy theories gaining traction in real time. Their brain absorbed 2 lessons at once. You can find anything, but you can't trust everything. So now they verify, cross-reference, check multiple sources. Read the comments to see if someone's correcting the article. They don't just have more information than previous generations, they have more doubt about that information. And when you combine unlimited options with constant doubt, you get something specific. Psychologist Barry Schwartz calls it the paradox of choice. The more options and information you have, the harder it becomes to commit to any single one. And Zillennials are the first generation to experience that paradox across every area of life simultaneously. The more they research, the more contradictions they find. The less certain they feel, the longer they wait. The longer they wait, the more they research. It's a loop, and it runs on everything. Big decisions, small decisions. The size almost doesn't matter. The loop runs anyway. If you've ever said, just pick one, it's not that serious, to your adult child, this is what's happening on their side. Their brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do. Gather all available data before committing. The problem is that all available data never ends. There's always one more opinion, one more angle. But that same skepticism makes them extremely hard to fool. They fact-check automatically. They spot manipulation that flies past people who grew up trusting whatever was in the newspaper. They're slow to decide. But when they finally do, they've considered things most people never thought about. All of this, the exhaustion, the career anxiety, the overthinking, feeds into something deeper, something that touches who they actually are. Who are you? Not your job title, not your Instagram bio, not the version of you that shows up at family dinners. You, the actual person underneath all of it. If you stripped away every platform, every role, every version of yourself you perform for different audiences, who's left? Most generations didn't struggle with that question the way Zillennials do. Being a teenager is when your brain builds identity. You try on different versions of yourself. You experiment. That's normal. But previous generations did it in one world. You tried being the funny kid at school. It worked or it didn't. You adjusted. One world. One set of feedback. One identity forming in real time. Zillennials did this across 6 or 7 worlds at once. Facebook, where your family could see you. Twitter, where you were unfiltered. Instagram that was curated. Snapchat that disappeared. Maybe a Tumblr that was deeply personal. Maybe a Reddit where you were anonymous. And then real life. School, work, family dinner, where you were yet another version. Each world had different rules. What got likes on Instagram would get you roasted on Twitter. What you posted on Tumblr at midnight would horrify your grandmother on Facebook. You weren't building one identity. You were building several. And your brain had to track all of them. Developmental psychologist James Marcia studied identity formation for decades. His research showed that identity is built through exploration and commitment. You try things, then you commit to what fits. But Zillennials got infinite exploration with delayed commitment. The exploration never ended because there was always another platform, another audience, another version to try. If you're a parent and your adult child seems like a different person depending on who they're with, this is why. They're not being fake. Their brain learned that different environments need different responses. That's not deception. That's adaptation built during the years when their brain was still deciding who they were. And it connects to something they struggle with constantly: commitment. Not just relationships, jobs, cities, hobbies, even small things. Think about this. A Zillennial is scrolling their phone at 11 p.m. They're looking at apartments in 3 different cities. They're watching a video about someone who quit their job to teach English in Portugal. They're reading about a career path they never considered. They're swiping on dating profiles of people they'll never meet. And in the morning, they go to their regular job, in their regular apartment, in their regular city. Nothing changes, but everything felt possible for a few hours. And now their actual life feels slightly smaller than it did before they picked up the phone. That's not restlessness. That's what happens when every alternative to your current life is visible, every single night. Previous generations committed more easily, not because they were better at it, because they couldn't see what they were missing. Zillennials see everything, all the time. There's always a quiet voice asking, what if the other option was better? And that voice isn't a character flaw. It's the predictable result of building a brain during the exact moment human options went from limited to infinite. You know what's strange, though? Ask a Zillennial about their favorite childhood memory and watch what happens. Their face changes. They'll tell you about riding bikes until the streetlights came on, about sleeping over at a friend's house and talking until 3 a.m. with no phones in the room. about the sound of a dial-up modem, about waiting all week for Saturday morning cartoons. They remember what it felt like to be completely present. No notifications, no pings, no other version of themselves to maintain, just being somewhere fully, with nothing competing for their attention. They're the last generation on Earth that has that memory. Every generation after them is being raised entirely inside the digital world. No analog foundation, no memory of before, just screens from the very beginning. Zillennials at least had both. They know what before felt like. They carry it, and whether they realize it or not, that memory is a kind of compass, pointing towards something the rest of the world is moving further away from every year. But what happens to a brain that never had a before, that never knew boredom, that never had to just sit with itself in a quiet room with nothing to scroll? Zillennials are the control group. They're the last people who can compare the two worlds from the inside because they lived in both. And that might make them the most important generation nobody's paying attention to.